What's up, fight fans? This is Kurt DeVille with Counterpunch Boxing News, and I have some new news concerning Deontay Wilder, Bob Arum, and Tyson Fury. Okay. As you guys know, if you don't know by now, that Deontay Wilder could be filing for damages based on the outcome of the arbitration. Okay. And I was asked to counterpunch this. I read it, and I wasn't even going to do a video on it because I felt I've already done enough, but I guess not, because people are still asking me, hey, what do you think about it? Hey, can you drop me some intel and some insight on this possible filing for damages on the behalf of Deontay Wilder's team? Okay. Now, Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury were set to fight for the third time after Tyson Fury won the rematch. Okay. Now, the fight kept getting pushed back due to the pandemic. And we're still suffering from the pandemic to this day. However, Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder were cool with the idea with changing the date. Changing the date again. Okay? And what happened was the amount of times they changed the date, and the reason they changed the date was because both sides, Fox and ESPN, did not want this to be in a bubble. They did not want it to be in a venue without a crowd, because they made $16 million on the live gate. And like I told you guys, you can't blame just Bob Arum. You have to blame Fox and Al Heyman too. You have to blame both sides, because both sides agreed, hey, let's have this fight, or let's wait for this fight to have a crowd. And if you guys can remember, that's why it got pushed eventually to December. You remember it went from December, I believe, 20th, and then after December 20th, it got moved to another date in December, and then it got pushed to January, okay? And then that's when Team Fury was like, no, we're not doing that, and then the contract on that behalf expired. Now, when it expired and Team Fury knew that, hey, we don't have a contractual agreement anymore due to the pandemic, they decided to move on, okay? Now, that's what happened. They decided to move on because, oh, okay, that's a way, you know, the contract's not valid. People were starting to ask questions, like, why is it having a third fight? The reason why a third fight was activated because Deontay Wilder exercised his rematch clause. He did what the contract stated. So I get that. I mean, that's what he's supposed to do. He's trying to make amends of the loss. He's lost once, so he's trying to get back in there and fight Fury again. But since they both agreed to keep changing the date, both parties kept changing the date. And they agreed to change the date until the contract expired. And then Tyson Fury was like, you know what? I don't want to fight next year, which is this year. I want to fight this year, which was last year in 2020. And when he found out that the contract expired, he went on ahead and opted out. He went on and him and his team decided, hey, we're going in another direction. And then we heard from Team Wilder. And then we heard from Deontay Wilder, you know, about the accusations and all that stuff. And then once he did say the accusations were, you know, derogatory towards Tyson Fury. And then Tyson Fury, in fact, said he would never fight Deontay Wilder because he offended his people. If you guys can remember that. That's what happened. But end of December, they started an arbitration, or beginning of January. So late December, early January, they started an arbitration. Catch everybody up to speed. Not arbitration, sorry, mediation. So the mediation started at that time. The mediation is over. Now it's the arbitration. Okay, so the arbitration for Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury is going by. But Bob Arum has already stated that it's not up to Team Wilder that stops this next fight. If you look at Tyson Fury and the trend, he was saying last year, get me a date, let me fight, get me a date. But the networks didn't want to have this behind closed doors because they were worried about the money that they were going to lose. That's what happened. So if you want to blame anybody for the Fury versus Wilder 3 fight not happening, you have to blame the networks on both sides. You have to blame them too because they were in agreement to keep changing the date. But little do they know, the contract stipulations were at stake because they expired. And when they expired, Team Fury had a way out. Now you have to remember, they had already agreed in principle to fight Anthony Joshua back in June of last year. So, Tyson Fury ain't losing any money because he's like, I'm going to fight Anthony Joshua. And in fact, I want to fight Anthony Joshua before Alexander Usyk fights him because there's no guarantee that he will beat Usyk. Okay, and he wants his retirement check. That's what he was worried about because he knew Anthony Joshua, and Team Joshua had all this money. He's the cash cow. Okay, so I think they put more energy into that at that point. The only problem I don't get from Team Fury said they were going to fight Aget Kabayel, and they still said they didn't have enough money. Right? It's not enough money for the fight to even take place. Even though Kabayel agreed to the money for the fight. So they said, well, you know what? There's not enough money for this fight, said Bob. Therefore, we're not having it. So, both of these guys have not fought since they fought each other. Now, what's happening now, Tyson Fury now is getting, Team Fury, they're getting antsy. They're getting impatient once again, just like they were with Wilder. They're doing it with Joshua. Even though they've signed the contract to fight each other, which they didn't have to sign last year because it was in the rematch contract. So that he didn't have to sign anything. It's already in the contract when he signed for the rematch to fight Deontay Wilder, right? So he just exercised the contract of the wording in that contract. Well, this particular situation is becoming complicated because now Tyson Fury doesn't want to wait for the outcome to let everything finalize for the Anthony Joshua fight. That's where we're at. That's where we're at right now. However, Deontay Wilder, Team Wilder, getting damages for that fight. I'm trying to realize or trying to see if there's any kind of way that he will even get damages, because both of these guys are at fault for waiting. They could have had that fight in a bubble a long time ago. I was specifically remembering when Tyson Fury said, I'll fight Deontay Wilder in a bubble, no problem. But again, I don't think it was up to Team Fury. I think it was up to his handlers, the promoters, and the networks. They were all in agreement because they made so much damn money, the second fight, the rematch, that they did not want to wait to have that fight with losing that money. So if you want to blame someone, you got to blame both. You have to blame both sides of the spectrum. But networks will not put anything up if they don't get their investment back. That's why they get 50% of overall everything, right? So everything you hear about, they're cutting it down the middle. That's the networks. So again, if I'm Deontay Wilder, if I want to file for any damages, I would wait for if it even happens now, I would wait for Joshua to fight Fury the first fight and see if I can come on top. Either I can get a winner or whatever. But if the fight doesn't happen, we still have to worry about if Tyson Fury says he wants to fight Wilder, because he said that recently, then there won't be any arbitration. They can stop arbitration and get back to training. They could do that. However, they're in two different countries. So it's still a travel ban, right? So it's going to be difficult for those guys to come over, and acclimate. They have to quarantine themselves, of course, coming from one country to the next. But, I mean, it could happen at the end of the day. So we just have to really see on Wilder getting damages. But the problem I'm having with all this is what the usual suspects keep talking about. Wilder is stopping Tyson Fury for fighting Anthony Joshua. No. If anything, Deontay Wilder would want Tyson Fury to fight Anthony Joshua. So then when he does go to sue, he will have some money to fork over if he wins. Doesn't that make sense? Because he's not going to stop Tyson Fury. Again, I've told people on both sides, if Vladimir Klitschko couldn't get his fight with Tyson Fury, what makes you think Deontay Wilder will? You're not going to make him do anything. It is what it is. So he'd probably be better off filing for damages than to get a third fight, unless that Anthony Joshua fight doesn't happen, and then we can see where he goes from that. But knowing Tyson Fury, he will probably want a tune-up fight or two. But anyway, you guys tell me what you think of Deontay Wilder filing for damages. Of course, please subscribe. And you guys been Counterpunch. Peace.